our live sessions. As always, we're very excited to be back for another week of answering all your questions. And so we'll always start off the same. As we pop on, and I can see people popping onto the stream, let me know you're here. We can always kind of see the numbers and see the count. And so I can see people are on the stream. So just pop in a few of those warm and fuzzies. Let me know you're here. Let me know you're excited. Absolutely let me know, if you're in a cool part of the world, let us know that. We know we have a global audience, so it's pretty cool. So where we're going to start is the same place we start every week for anybody who's been on these lives before. We want to start with the Tuesday recap. And so the Tuesday recap was yesterday. I wanted to really focus in on a commonly asked Google question. And so this commonly asked question is really about upping customer satisfaction. Why is that such an important conversation, important question for Google? It's because they're really becoming more and more client focused, especially when you think about advertising. Hey, okay, we got people live. Awesome. Thanks, JK. So as they look to add more advertising, right, as they look to absolutely grow GCP, that's going to become a bigger revenue stream for them. So as they look to do those things, we're going to get more of these questions about upping customer satisfaction. But this, across the board, this is also a question that recruiters are actively sharing with our clients. It's 80 to 90% thing. So how are we going to do that? Well, you want to focus in on a bunch of different items. Again, I'm not going to recap and go through the whole video for time, but it's a really, really important question to ponder, because really, if we break away from improving customer satisfaction from 80 to 90%, what we really want to think about is, how do we improve anything? Interactions, not only externally, but internally. How do we improve items when we don't necessarily have all the tools and resources, right? So just a good item to ponder. The other thing that I'm going to table for just a moment is I did a LinkedIn post on Saturday that was the most responded to post I've ever done, and hasn't even been close. And I want to talk a little bit about what happened in that post. I'm going to wait for more people to come in on the stream, but if you stick with me, we can talk about a really critical item. We're probably going to target that somewhere halfway in, and I'll just ping it to Eirik and just say, hey, Eirik, if I forget to bring it up, let me bring it up. But, we've had about 230 to 240 engagements on that LinkedIn post, and it's just a really interesting concept for us to talk about in regards to having backup candidates and what happens there. So something we'll touch base on, because I want to just dive in and get to questions. I don't like too much fluff in the lives. Last quick plug, practiceinterviews.com. We have a bunch of services. We have that free desktop app. There's a ton of free content. That's what we're here to do. We're here to help. So I see some people popping on. Thank you, everybody. Sammy Ferris, I see everybody coming on here, and thank you so much. So why don't we dive right in? It looks like Ferris came in with a question, so let's dive right in. Okay, context, your recruiter wanted you to find the team match. Yep, I remember this, for a program manager at Google, and the brief update is he's been responding, but communication is bad, and he doesn't address all my full questions. So Ferris, I'm actually going to kick it back to you, because I realized I didn't ask you a critical question in last week's live, and the critical question was, how many team match conversations have you had, and when did the interview process end? Because sometimes what happens is recruiters don't see a ton of viability, and that's why they shut down. And so I just want to understand, let's get a little bit more data from you, because I want to spend a little bit of time digging in. Another quick comment for anybody coming in here. This is not just about questions. This is about providing feedback, providing engagement, the warm and fuzzies, the data points. We really want to drive the community and make sure that everybody's getting value. So Ferris, I'm going to have you come back, give a few more data points. Number of team match calls you've already had. When did the actual interview process end? When was your actual real last interview? Thanks. Oh boy. All right, we're going to skip that question and move on. All right. So you completed your final rounds with Google yesterday and received your verbal offer today. Whoa, going straight to team matching and skipped hiring committee. based on interview feedback. Okay, wow, that's pretty strange. And do you have any tips for navigating the negotiation process? When does it start and how does that work? Yeah, so at any company, one of the items I want everybody to be ready for is anytime you kick off the interview process, any really, really good recruiter or sourcer is going to ask for compensation information. I actually got into a pretty big thing when I was at Google because I wanted sourcers to ask for compensation information, and I kind of rolled it up to leadership and really pushed, and they didn't feel comfortable doing it, which I don't really get, but anticipate it really, really early on. But when you get to the negotiation process, if I could only give one piece of advice to everybody globally on negotiation that will absolutely be a game changer for the rest of your career, it's something we talk about all the time. Set the anchor high. This is science and data. This is not Jeff. This has nothing to do with anything other than if we set the anchor high, it's going to be absolutely critical for your success, because the science shows that once people hear a number, they get fixated on it, and our brain is literally unable to disconnect from that number. So if you think the job pays 200, you want 250, anchor at 300K. Just anchor at it. They're not going to walk away because you said 300K. Like, it just doesn't happen, especially at big tech. They've heard 1 million, they've heard 2 million, they've heard 3 million, even for lower level offers. They've just heard it all. So setting the anchor high is going to be the number one piece. And then the second piece is back up everything with being gracious and kind. Those are going to be the two keys for success. Okay, Thad, you're back. So thanks again for hosting, of course. Okay, so you finally heard back from Amazon. Everybody who's watching went into the process through a referral, and he's been waiting a long time to hear back. And they mentioned that they're highly interested to start the process with you. Okay. Your question is, have you heard of their online assessment? According to the recruiter, this is the first step. Yep, heard of the online assessment. Okay. And then, third question. So seeking if you have any experience suggestions with these kinds of assessments or Amazon's particular assessment. All right, Thad, I'm going to throw that right back to you. It's a great question. Have you received the assessment? Is there anything that's really challenging for you in the assessment? The biggest thing, if these organizations send you any sort of upfront work, right? Any upfront assessment, they want you to go through an exercise. On the engineering side, sometimes you'll have to come in with like a coding sample. Really, really spend your time, right? Why would we not be incredibly thorough? Have somebody else look it over. Share with somebody else. Hey, does this make sense? Does this look clear? Like, there's so much value in getting that additional lens and other sets of eyes, even when it's on these early assessments. Don't do anything on your own. We all have friends or significant others or current or former colleagues, people who can help us. Really lean on those people for the assessment stuff, because they're going to give you a little bit of a different lens. And that's a great pivot really quickly over to, if you ever have to do a presentation in the interview process, make sure that you're getting multiple sets of eyes. This is this kind of inclusivity lens. If we bring everybody into the picture to see what we're doing, you're going to have way more success. So Thad, if you have any additional follow-up questions, let me know and come back to me. Thanks. Okay, scroll down quite a bit to get there. So, okay, let's try this one. So you're done with 4 rounds of an interview for a solutions consultant. The last one is on Tuesday, which is RRK. I checked with the HR for feedback from the previous interviews, and she informed me that there are no red flags. Does this make my candidature good or trending positive for success, or what should I take away from this feedback? Any pointers will be helpful. So we actually talked about this a little bit in last week's live. We continue to try and control things in the process that are pretty much a waste of time. And I want to say that in the kindest way, but like when we try and like spend all of our time and energy reading into this feedback, not a good use of our time. Let's go ahead and just continue to prep hard. Hey, if they said there's no red flags, that's neither positive nor negative, right? Hey, there's nothing that was flagged. That doesn't mean the interview feedback was great either. They're just trying to play it a little bit coy, a little bit safe. So there's so much of this interview process that we want to control. Let's relinquish control in terms of what we can't control, and let's take our control back and focus in on the interview process. I know that this seems more high level, but it's actually a critical data point. People get so fixated on their scores and what happened and can they get feedback and why can't they get more data? Don't worry about it. Just practice your interview skills and make sure that each step along the way, you're getting better and better. That's going to be the most important thing. Okay, so Max, any recommendations for a technical product expert role? Max, I'm going to throw that right back to you. Where are you interviewing? That's going to be a critical facet for us to help you in this process. But technical product expertise, probably the hottest thing in the market right now. We all know product is super hot, but then when it comes to really getting technical on the product side, you're basically the top of the line for what these companies are looking for. It's AI, ML, Eng, and technical product managers, or any product manager, two hottest roles in the world right now. Come back to us. Tell us a little bit more about who you're interviewing for. Okay, Ferris, thanks for coming back. So he said he had low bandwidth and would do his best. Question, should I just apply to roles directly with a referral in lieu of sending him the roles? What advantage do I get by sending him the roles? Yeah, at this point, again, for anybody watching, Ferris interviewed, got into the team match phase, and then the recruiter's like, look, I don't have time to help you with the team match phase, which is pretty weird. Like, that doesn't normally happen. Now, sometimes that happens when you've had 5 or 10 team match calls and the recruiter just can't find you the right fit. But unless it's been sort of that process, yeah, go back to your referral. Find a different way. This recruiter isn't supporting you. You may get to a stage where you have to be a little bit tougher and firmer in a really nice way with the recruiter. Say, I'm not the expert when it comes to this process. You are. Is this pretty typical then when we get to the team match stage that I'm trying to find all the roles? Like, you're going to have to be really, really careful on the cadence and the verbiage you use there. But we're getting to the point where it's like, okay, why is this recruiter not helping you? Maybe you just need to push and say, look, I need a little bit more insight. Is my feedback not that good? Is my skill set not that aligned? Because it's my understanding from my friends who have been hired at Google that in the team match stage, usually the recruiter's working to find them teams. It's very, very difficult to be on the outside trying to find a role when I don't have any data. You're asking me to basically work in blind. Like, I can't see anything. I don't know. I don't have any visibility. So I hope that helps. But if you can let us know a little bit more about where you're at in the process, come back to me. Interviewing from India for a Google India office. Product analyst. Okay, your interviewer will be from Mountain View office. Anything you should know about? Any commonalities in Mountain View interviewers? Nope, you are just going to absolutely straight up adjust to personality type. So if you get an interviewer, Jane, who's fast, quick, wants to move, interrupts you, kind of jumps in, okay. So we're going to be faster. We're going to pick up the pace. We're going to try and match Jane as much as we can. You get Sue, our cool interviewer. Everybody loves Sue. Then we're going to be a little bit more casual, a little bit laid back. Of course, there's always cultural nuances that you want to be aware of and be looking for. But no, it really is on an individual basis. Yeah, cultural items will come up a little bit, but mostly it's just the person and the day that they're having. So deep breaths. It's obviously a good opportunity. There's a lot more coming in at these product ops, product analyst roles. We're seeing a lot more of that because product is becoming a bigger focus for these companies. So make sure you go into our free app, and we'll pin that link in the YouTube description. We definitely have some like product analyst, product ops analyst questions in there, pretty sure. Okay, this is a good question. We get this question sometimes. Sorry, I'm still trying to get my coffee down. How important are references, internal and external, for hiring committee packet? They'll help a little bit. Yeah, they'll help a little bit. So one of the items that they were doing while I was there, and I don't know if they're still doing it, but they were, your internal referrals are scaled. So it's like best person I've ever worked with, top 5%, top 10%, top 20%, top 50%. So if you get an internal referral and they're like, this is the best person I've ever worked with, absolutely it's going to have a higher stake for hiring committee as opposed to somebody who's like, hey, this is top 50%. So some referrals will carry a little bit more weight than others. If you have a lot of internal referrals and they're on the fence, yeah, it can help. It can skew it a little bit. Usually it's not going to be huge, but internal referrals are important because they're actual real data. Where interviewing, we all know it's really pretty imperfect. So just something to be thinking about. I hope that helps. I know that was super high level. Okay. Okay, so we are creating, just so everybody's aware, we're creating a sign up in our Slack to connect with other people so you can do peer practice one-on-one for free. And so we are getting that set up this week, I think. So if you want to sign up for the Slack channel, a lot of other companies and like people on YouTube are doing this, and we see some validity there. So if you want to get some practice with other people who are interviewing for some of these FAANG companies, we think that could be helpful. Thanks, Ira, for posting that. Your last Googliness and Leadership interviewer showed up late and only covered leadership. Recruiter said other feedback were very positive, but missing Googliness requires a redo. Any comments on how you should approach it? Yeah, when your interviewer messes up, we just need to kind of move forward with it and just do that additional interview. It's kind of interesting because sometimes Googliness and leadership can really, the lines can be very blurred. So the fact that you really kind of recognize that it was just leadership is interesting. Those questions must have been very, very leadership driven. But yeah, you just have to go for it. Again, this becomes what we talked about a few minutes ago, which is you can't control that interviewer messed up. What you can control is that you really start preparing for those Googliness types of questions and that you come in with a super, super positive attitude. Even if the interviewer has context and they're like, oh, looks like the last interviewer messed up. Oh, no big deal. I just want to do the best. I'm really excited, engaged. Keep that positive pitch and tone. That will actually be a fantastic cue for Googliness. If you're coming on a video for a Googliness and Leadership interview, you should be like this when they come on. It should be something like so over the top, so ridiculous. Like you just have to come in with this huge smile because that's what Googliness is about. It's about being a good person. Now it translates to other depths, but yeah, you can't control it. So don't even worry about what happened with that last interviewer. It's a bummer, but you just got to go ahead and move forward and just make sure you crush that last interview. I hope that helps. Okay, so the last on-site was the end of April. Okay, so quick context. Ferris is in the team match stage, and ultimately what happened is his recruiter was like, hey, like, I don't want to help you with the team match thing. So last on-site was at the end of April. Feedback was early May. Consensus, I'm a good fit with Google. Variance and signal on leveling. And then he said he has a lot of headcount to fill, but has low bandwidth because recruiters are stretched thin. So he wants me to help him help me. That's all I got out of the phone call with the recruiter. We've agreed on weekly emails, but response is bad. Wow. As a recruiter at Google, just so we can give you the internal lens, like the average, like on a quarterly basis, you have to hire, it depends on your role, but it's about like 5 or 6. Let's just call it 6 for ease. So it's 2 a month that you need to hire. It's actually a very, very difficult and aggressive target because it's hard to get people through the process. Most people don't pass the interview process. That's why you're here. And it's not just Google, it's any company, but most people don't pass the interview process. So this is a little weird. If you're so great, like why isn't he helping you more? Because you can just contribute to his number of getting a hire. So this is just, I think I've been pretty candid and honest with the community that I've tried to provide feedback to Google of what's happening in recruiting and how recruiting is really, really letting candidates down. And just so everybody's aware, they weren't interested in my feedback, which I offered for free to meet with leadership and tell them what I'm seeing from an external lens. They're not interested. So Ferris, you're just gonna have to be patient, keep doing what you're doing. And I would say I like your approach and your step. So I would definitely say, hey, like go ahead, and reach out to your referral and circumvent the recruiter. Because at this point, if they don't want to help you, go around them. And then when it comes to survey feedback time, we have to give honest feedback, or else these recruiters will continue to do this to other people. This pay it forward model when it comes to bad recruiters, interviewers who show up late. Like, if we're not providing feedback, you got to provide that feedback. It's going to be so helpful for just a larger community. So keep checking in with us and let us know how it's going. Thanks. Okay. So we got Sammy here. Successfully finished the on-site interview and already had your team match. Hiring manager interviewed you for RRK. Okay. Okay, Sammy, I'm sorry. I think I'm forgetting in the string of messages. Come back and give me a little bit more context for how I can help. Sorry, I think I've lost the initial comment that you made. So please come back and I'll be happy to answer. Okay, had final round for one role yesterday. It was intense, but I think it went well. GCA questions are alive and well at any level, folks. Okay. And then interview later today for another role, and Tuesday nerves are non-existent. Hoping for another offer this month from one or two teams. Can you discuss competing offers from different teams? Okay, so it sounds like, okay, so Tina's background story really quickly. AVP role, that's Associate Business Partner at Google. She's been in the process since July of last year. We've been in the team match stage for a long time. So it's a little surprising that they are really coming to you with very open-ended questions in this team match stage, but maybe that's just a product of what they've been seeing in terms of finding the right person. So competing offers from different teams internally, that's really ultimately going to be your decision. What team do you get the better feel for? And really, it's just so critical that you don't feel any spikes or any anxiety from the potential hiring manager, that you feel really warm and fuzzy with them. Even if, let's say, there are parts of the position that you don't favor as much from the team match stage, I really want you to pick it on the person and worry less about maybe like the niche down area. That's going to be way less important, because in these AVP roles, especially, your relationship with the hiring manager is the #1 item. But them competing against each other, like, there's not going to be any comp stuff. It's just like ultimately you saying, hey, I really did like Jane's team and I want to go with her. And that's basically it. And then you make that decision. If Jane wants to move forward and you want to move forward, you move forward. And that's really all it is. You ultimately can make that decision. I hope that helps. And continue to let us know what's going on. Okay. You have a TPM interview on Tuesday. You cleared the phone, an initial RRK last week. The interviewing committee told me that there would be 3+ rounds to go and sent me the calendar invites. But they aren't saying what the next round on Tuesday is going to be. Should I be asking the hiring committee to tell me what the next round will be? You should be asking your recruiter to tell you what the next round should be. They should never hold back like, hey, this is Googliness and Leadership. This is going to be your GCA. This is going to be your program management. This is going to be your cross-functional, whatever it's going to be. They should be outlining which interview is which. Now, they might not tell you the interviewers. I never, ever did. And never shared the interviewers. That there's no like really hard, fast rule there. So you'll see a lot of differences. Sometimes they share all the information on the interviewers. I just like to protect the confidentiality of my interviewers, so I never shared it. That was just my default mode. But absolutely, in terms of focus area, you should have that data, have that information. Okay. Oh, okay. So they heard 3 million even for lower levels. So I kind of mentioned that no fear-based in negotiation. The numbers can be really high. I've told this story a few times on live, but I did have an L7 candidate ask for 2 million. And again, you think about L7, now 2 million is not in the range for an L7, right? Even Bay Area, New York, it doesn't matter how good you are. You could be principal engineer, ML, AI. I mean, you can get a really big salary at an L7. I mean, that could be literally up to $1 million. for that kind of role at L7 if you were really, really niched down in a premium plus market like Bay or New York. But 2 million for an L7, I mean, no way, right? Like there's no way that's going to happen. But here's the thing, like people would think that I would have overreacted to that. So the first time we talked, they said 1 million. And then the second time we talked, they said, I changed my mind. I want 2 million a year. And I said, okay. And I just kind of calmly said, well, why? Give me the why. And they gave me the why. And I said, okay, I'll take that back to the team. And we did end up getting a strong offer for this candidate. I'm not going to say how much it was, but it was a big number for an L7. But I didn't run for the hills because they said 2 million. I just took the information in, and any good recruiter is just going to hear it, take it in, and not be reactive, right? And so that's why oftentimes I'm seeing candidates create a lot of fear for themselves at very, very low differentials. Meaning, again, let's go back to that initial item. If you think the job pays about 200 and you come in at 300, is it really that big of a difference? Like, is it really so much that a recruiter is going to go running for the hills? Probably not. Now, if you did that at like ABC Corp and they're a very small company and they have very little flexibility, yeah, different story, right? But if you're going after these big companies that have a lot of bandwidth, especially to push on stock compensation, big numbers are not going to scare them. So awesome. Thank you so much for chiming in. I'm glad you heard that 3 million. I tried to throw that in there and sneak that in there, and you didn't let me get away with it. So awesome. Thank you. Okay. During an interview, I was asked, what do you wish we had asked you? What is the purpose of this question, and how could it best be answered? Okay. What do you wish? I mean, that's really a personal choice, but probably what you want to try and do when you get a question like that is introduce some sort of really unique or awesome skill that you have, or a skill that you think was really pertinent to the role, but they didn't up, and you thought going into the interview, wow, definitely going to ask me a question about this skill set because it's a critical item to have success in this role. So I would really think skills and strengths focused. And even if they did ask you something close to that, just kind of drive that in. Say, oh, I thought we were going to spend more time in this area because, first of all, I'm super passionate about it. I have some great examples, and I'd love to share more about that skill set or problem solve more in that area with you. Do you want to take that step? So we actually answer it, and then we end that item with a follow-up question to see if they want to dive deeper. Because if it's something they didn't ask you that you want to talk about, you should be pretty strong in that area. That's an awesome, that's a pretty interesting question though. So yeah, lots of opportunity. Drive it towards your skills and strengths. And that's really the goal. We're trying to talk about what we're good at as much as we can in these interviews, and we're also trying to build in the space for Sue that Sue can lead and guide us, and we can talk about what Sue wants to talk about. So it's a little bit of both. We take control by talking about what we're really good at, and then we also take kind of a step back to build in space for our interviewer, Sue, to talk about what Sue wants to talk about. If you can build that nice balance, that is absolutely going to yield a ton of success. Thanks. Great question. How long on average do you see people waiting for team match? I got one team interested in me in the first week. I'm hesitant to relocate to the Bay, but I know waiting for LA area could be months. Yeah, Alex, you're gonna have to go for this. I would not sit on LA. Look, I moved from San Diego up to the Bay. I love SoCal, and I'm back in San Diego because I do really love Southern California. The Bay is awesome too. Obviously, price point's high. LA is super expensive as well. But when it comes to the team match stage, don't sit on LA. The Venice office is small. It's crowded. They're running out of space. And until they build a much bigger office, whether that's going to be downtown or expanding Venice, whatever it's going to be, LA is going to be pretty tight. So I would say just be open to the Bay. I know it's very easy for me to say that, but my personal story is I left my wife in San Diego to go to the Bay, and I flew back every weekend, and I had this tiny little studio. I could go into this story. It's pretty interesting. I had this tiny little studio in San Jose, but I flew back every weekend. Was that ideal? No, but I mean, look where it got me, right? So you can make sacrifices. It's not always that easy. And I know I'm kind of trying to simplify it, but on the team match stage, just don't sit on LA. It's a tough market to get a role, and space is just, they want people in the office at Google, and the space there. It's an awesome office in Venice, but it's super tight. And this is like 3 or 4 years ago where it was tight. So I can't imagine what it's like now when people go back. So I hope that helps. Come back if you have any additional questions. Okay. Been going through all my videos and going back through some older ones. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. I'm actually going to throw this out on LinkedIn this week. I want to get a little tough here, right? There's two primary types. Well, there's three primary types of videos that I've created that absolutely nobody watches. One is on networking. The second is on kind of LinkedIn, and the third is on resumes. Those videos get no views. Like literally nobody watches them. I did a 3 series on networking, and like sometimes those videos don't get views for a week. But if you don't know anybody in big tech, those are going to be your 3 keys to success: is building that strong networking strategy, 1, having a very up-to-date and good-looking LinkedIn profile, and then backing it up with a really nice resume. And it's just, we typically get these questions every single week, like, how do I get into these big tech companies when I don't know anybody? Well, the steps have been outlined in videos, but people don't actually watch those videos, and especially LinkedIn. There is not a single video on YouTube that has 1 million views that's been done on how to build a nice profile, how to network on there. But that's how I got into Google. I had a really nice LinkedIn profile. And anytime I had an added skill set, especially when I started recruiting software engineers, I immediately updated my LinkedIn. That's how somebody randomly found me for Google. And here we are today in the live. So it's just it's a great item. Some of those early videos, especially the first one, if anybody wants to see a terrible YouTube video, go watch my first video. This is all part of our journey and story, right? And so I really want to pull it down. It's really bad. But I hope that in some of those earlier videos, I was still thinking in the right way and providing some good guidance and feedback. So thank you for that. So I want to just take a pause. Always when we hit at 10:30, 10:40, we have a pretty good audience. So I want to touch base just really quickly on my LinkedIn post from Saturday, because I think it's a critical data point. So it's about backup candidates. And people hated this post. And I don't know why they hated it, but basically, let's say you are interviewing for a specific role at a specific company. Let's definitely talk about the FAANG companies. They do not have backup candidates. There is not a list of people waiting behind you. Why is this an important data point? Because it means that you can spend more time in the offer stage, more time in the negotiation stage. And if they're like, hey, we have 3 people waiting behind you, they don't. They don't. If they did, then everybody would sign up to be a recruiter, because it would be the easiest job, because every time I hired for a position, I just have a line of candidates who passed this very rigorous and tough interview process, and we're just sitting there and waiting to be hired. It's a complete lie. It does not exist. And so the reason why I say this and wanted to bring it up really quickly is when you get to the offer stage, that deadline, you have a little bit of time. There are not 1 million people waiting behind you. Now, hey, if you're a back-end Python engineer, do they have backups? Sure, but you're going into a more open process for a specific role, specific position. It's very rare they have backups. In the 5 years I was at Google, when we had specific candidates for a specific role, I never, ever had 2 HC approved candidates at the same time. It just doesn't happen. So a lot of people didn't agree with that. But honestly, it's just the truth. Okay, so yeah, we like to throw out these questions like midway through as well. So can you share a few examples of ambiguity that you have used during your Google interviews? So I think what Irik's asking essentially is what have you done to navigate ambiguity? And that could be Google or any other interview. If you have any comments or feedback, again, we love questions, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to answer any of your questions to the best of my ability. But if you have some data you want to share with us, specifically in regards to ambiguity, yeah, throw it out there. We'd love to hear it. I'm just going to sit on that for a second so everybody can see it. Okay. So Is it good or bad news if you get a feedback call within 1 or 2 days? Yeah, so again, we're trying to control something we can't control. We don't know. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Yeah, so uh, we're just trying to control, again, a data point that we don't know. Now, a good recruiter will always preempt with positive news. Like, I would never leave you hanging. I'd say, hey, Jen, I have great news. Let's hop on the phone as soon as possible. Typically when you get a message like, I want to talk to you this week, or we need to follow up, again, a good human being who has an empathetic lens is going to put the positive piece of information in there. And if it's not positive, they're going to leave it out. I hope that feedback helps. Okay, awesome, Alex. So one of the things I want to mention here really, really quickly is, and Eric will laugh with me, we saw one of our competitors in one of their lives claiming that they got 10 people a week or 20 people a week hired at X company. We don't get anybody hired anywhere. You do it. You did all the work. We're just here to provide a little bit of guidance and advice. And it's really about your time, your dedication, your effort. It's about you. So I really want you to just congratulate yourself. We're so happy to be a part of your journey, but we understand we are just a tiny little component. We're just a little piece because you were doing all the hard work in the background to get there. So really happy that you're at the team match stage. Okay. All right, cool. So somebody got feedback within a day and it was positive. Awesome. Remember also, feedback comes in due to urgency. So sometimes internally, maybe they're pushing a little bit more because the position's been open a long time. They just really need to fill it. And sometimes that will push the urgency to get back to you quickly. Hopefully we have that data point, but a lot of times we don't. Okay. After one has completed interviews with Google for a recruiter role at HQ, how long is the wait? How should I proceed? Thank you. Sure. You don't want to wait more than 5 business days. 5 business days, if you haven't heard back, you follow up. No standard amount of time, but after 5 business days, you wanna follow up. Good luck. It's a fun role. I think they're still at the Quad in Mountain View. It's a fun kind of like open campus. It used to be for sales, and I believe they're still there. I moved around to quite a few campuses while I was at Google. You can't work on the main campus anymore, which is a bummer. But when you go back to work, free food, free gym, it's pretty great. Okay, the lead position Google reached out to back in January, and you missed the email. In April, the recruiter reached out to see if you were still interested. Can I leverage this during negotiation? Nope. No, that's them coming to you versus you proactively going to them or you being referred in. The methodology for getting into any of these big companies is not a leverage point. The leverage point is that you pass the interview process and then that you know how to negotiate. The biggest leverage point is that you go in with that high anchor. That's the biggest item you can do. Hiring manager asks that you have a casual conversation with a team member, what to expect. Okay, this is always a good step, Sammy. So like, you really want to think about when we get into these casual conversations, there's a trigger because they already like you. And so what they're looking for is a little bit more team match, personality match with other team members. So you want to go in with a super inquisitive lens, meaning you have about 30 questions that you've written out for this person. We can pin in the YouTube description the video questions to ask your interviewer, and it's still going to be like more team member focused. So you want to come in with a ton of questions, and then your lens, and we haven't used this word today, which is shocking to be 40 minutes in, but it's a heavy collaborative lens. You like working with others, you like helping others, you like mentoring others. How do you collaborate and work well with others? That is going to be your absolute lean, the entire conversation, how you can come in, help, support, but how you also like to sit back, listen, question, observe, and really be a part of the process. I hope that helps. You have an offer from LinkedIn. The take-home base pay is less than I make currently, but LI included RSU options and the role is interesting. Should you accept or negotiate? Always negotiate. 100% of the time, negotiate 100%. Even if they say this offer is non-negotiable, we still try and push a little bit in a really nice and casual and friendly way. The base salaries, this is, I feel like this should be a known data point, but the base salaries at the big tech companies typically, not all the time, but typically are going to be lower because of the strong stock component that's going to bring the overall total compensation up. They look at it from a total comp model and they do not break the mold there. They just say it's X number. They don't look at how it's actually broken down. They don't really care. And remember, a lot of these big tech companies, the base salary bands are really, really tight. They're really tight. You know, it might only be like a 20 to 30K band. So the ability to push on the base, not as good. When we negotiate, we do two things. We set the anchor high, of course, and just know that the RSU component, always the number one flex point for these companies. Always. To get you more shares, like take a company like Google, that the Goog stock, GOOG ticker, is about to hit 2,500 a share. So let's say we're trying to get 10K more a year. That's 4 shares a year. It's not a big number. It's not a big number for them to give you 4 additional shares. So RSUs will always be our push point. I hope that helps. You graduated years ago and have some personal circumstances that did not allow me to work till now. What's the best way to start my career? Can I still work at a company like a Google? Yeah, absolutely. We all have things come up in our lives that are personal, and some are more overwhelming and require a larger need to be away from work for larger periods of time. The biggest thing is if we finish school and then we want to get back into the workforce, how are we upping our skill set with some really unique skills, whether that's like learning GCP or learning program management? One of the tools I love is if you get an upgraded LinkedIn account, the LinkedIn Learning. Like there's a ton there, but you can go to Coursera, you can go to Udemy, you can go to any of these platforms, but just really start to up your knowledge in the space that you're interested in, because it shows continuing education and it shows that you're a continual learner and it shows that you're trying to stay active and engaged. But absolutely, there is literally no circumstance where we can't get into these companies like Google's. I hired more people than you would believe that like never even went to college, but they had built up their skill set over time. And so there's tons of opportunities, even when there's been long breaks in work. Just have that confidence, but couple it with the learning. That's going to be huge. I hope that helps. General question. Has anyone come across GCA Googliness leadership questions that are not covered in the question bank for any role? How do you address such questions, and could you please share your experience? I'm about to head for a GCA G&L interview in the next 28 hours. So we need to holistically, this was a big portion of last week's live if you want to talk about GCA questions, but we continue to feel the need for questions. But the real default mode that's going to be the most critical is understanding the structure, the organization, and the level of detail. If you had all the GCA questions in the world, but you didn't know how to answer them or put them together, the actual questions themselves are pretty useless. And I think that like practice GCA questions across the board are almost one of the most useless things. What is the biggest key in a GCA question? Attach the solution to the role. Solution to the role, solution to the role. So you're really staying connected, because especially the random GCA questions are intended to throw your brain down a totally different path. And then we end up spending all of our time talking about the location or talking about something that's just not pertinent to the job at all. Now, from a Googliness and leadership perspective, those are thematic. So the themes are on the leadership side. Okay, so how do you mentor others? How do you lead and guide others? How have you dealt with challenging conflict, challenging coworkers, challenging external stakeholders? And then on the Googliness side, how have you brought like real creativity and fun? How do you have that inclusivity lens? It's more holistic. So coming up with new questions, yeah, absolutely. If people want to throw some of those questions into the live chat, we're happy to see them. But I think thematically, we just need to step away from these questions. I know that it kind of gives us the warm and fuzzies to feel like we have all these questions, but the questions are endless. And if we spend our time just prepping on the questions, we're going to get fixated on something. If we get fixated on a particular type of question, what's going to happen is we haven't done the basic work to create our behavioral answers that are really strong, or to create those strong go-to clarifying questions or frameworks. And we see this consistently with our clients. It's like, give me more questions, more questions, more questions. And it's like, well, Bob, we still haven't gotten the structure right. So get the foundational items right, get all that foundational stuff done, and then go to the questions, because the questions they're just less important than having this baseline knowledge. Remember, structure, organization, and level of detail are the keys to success in any interview at any company. Okay, you just completed your interview. Okay, I think, is there another? Okay, let's see if let's go back to this. Just completed your stint of interviews with Google last Tuesday. It's for a recruiter role. Your tutorials helped you greatly. How should you proceed in the wait right now? If it's been more than 5 days, if you completed your interviews last Tuesday and you haven't heard back, yep, keep this live on, open up a new tab, send the email and check in. Anything after 5 business days is a check-in. Yeah, good luck. Let us know how it goes. Okay, DV360, going to be your 7th interview. So Max is interviewing for a technical product role. And so DV360, okay, so that's a specific Google product. And so 7th interview, RRK and Leadership, passing all the interviews, but never got an offer, only higher positions. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think you want to, if you're getting all these interviews, obviously something's going right. Really kind of think about this product area, but remember, what do we know about these product interviews? Just got to be ready for the really, really random stuff, right? Like whether it's going to be in RRK and Leadership, so RRK, we're going to probably think a little bit on straight up technical questions, technical product questions. We might get a little bit on the side of things too. And then on the leadership side, we're going to look a little bit product strategy, product analysis, etc. This is tricky. Let me know if you have any additional questions. I mean, I feel like you're in a good place. You're starting to get to the law of diminishing returns. When you start to interview too much, it really, really, it benefits you less and less. And Google has this internal documentation, but they're not really applying it as much as they should. They still tend to over interview, especially in the later stages. I hope that helps. Your recruiter told you that a lot of changes are happening in the process, that they're phasing out the hiring committee stage to speed up the process. After team match, then go straight to the compensation team. Yeah, I heard this too. You're not the only person to share this piece of data. I heard this a couple times this week. So I'm going to go back to my internal peeps and just kind of find out like what's going on, because it's probably time. It's probably time that they phased out hiring committee. I don't know that they're going to 100% phase it out, but I don't have that data point. So thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds like they did start to phase it out over the last couple of years for very niche or specific roles, but it sounds like maybe it's happening more holistically. So I'm going to do a deep dive and maybe get a little bit more into the weeds of that next week, and I will make sure I mentally table that item, and then I reach out to some of my people, because I am hearing that. I hope that that's a good thing. Hiring committee can absolutely be the toughest part of the process. So thank you so much for that data point. Okay. What pointers would you provide to help convince the hiring manager to hire you for a role that you don't have previous experience in? So this is a lens item. So I actually love hiring people that don't have experience in a specific domain. But what is the correlation? What's the correlation of your skills that are actually going to provide that really powerful lens? That's the way you really want to think about it for convincing a hiring manager. It's like you get the question of why should we hire you? Well, correlate your skills and how those skills apply to the role. And then really lastly, focus in on that unique lens piece. Like, what is that unique lens that's going to truly add value? I hope that helps. Okay, audience poll, please comment below what the country you're watching from. We've been super, super lucky we've actually had clients in over 30 countries, which just honestly just totally blows my mind. It's so amazing. Every part of the world we've had clients, and it's just, that has less to do with me. It's just really the power of YouTube and how like amazing the reach is there. But we know we have a really cool global audience, and every time a new country pops in for our clients, which is getting a little bit more rare, it's getting a little harder. It's super fun. Okay, we got somebody from the US. That's awesome. Okay. So how can you make the best use of a shared document sheet for open-ended questions that involve CFAS? I don't like the Google Doc. I think it's super, super tough. Yeah, I can see why you're struggling to make the connection. I would say only use like Doc or Draw, like if it's more like system design focused, or even if you were more on like the product side of things. But typically at Doc's not super helpful. Just hoping to get people back into the office, interviewing live so you can use the whiteboard, because I used it all the time in my interviews. But I would say I would default to not using it most of the time. It's pretty tricky to use, and I think you can see why I'm saying it. So I would default to not using it. I hope that helps. Okay, Mongolia, that is super fun. UK, yes, especially London is a huge part of our client base. London, and obviously Dublin is a huge tech hub, so a lot coming out of Dublin as well. Okay, so absolutely. So if you only apply for Japan, is that good or bad? No, it's fine. Yeah, if you really want to be in Japan, obviously it's an awesome location. So yeah, if you want to be in Japan, I say go for it. Don't worry about narrowing your focus. Just make sure that whatever location you're applying for, going for, just has the roles and jobs you want. I hope that helps. Okay. In the recruiter, okay, so in the welcome email, the process recruiter, what is your total expected compensation, including base, bonus, and equity? I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Remembered you suggested to prolong confirming that question as long as possible to shoot. Ended up ending with, I'd like to see how I can get a better idea of the role, my experience and skills, get a more accurate. Curious in your thoughts of that response and suggestions. Yes, never answer that question. Initially, that's a ridiculous question to ask. You don't know, you haven't met anybody, you don't know anything about the position. How could they possibly ask you for your comp? Now, I expect them to ask. I would absolutely ask you, but two default things. I would say kind of exactly like, hey, I don't know yet. Like, I still need to learn more about the role. Sometimes, I had this come up with a close friend of mine. He said he was forced to put in a number because the system actually required a number. Put 0. If you get one of those forms and it actually requires a number, put 0. Because they're never going to stop the process because you don't give that comp information. If they're like, no, we won't move forward unless you give the comp information, walk away. It's not your job. It's not the company. If they need to have that data point right in the beginning and they won't talk to you, fine, don't talk to them. It's like, you can't be asked for that information right away. You just don't have enough data. You're working with limited to no data. So good move that. You did exactly what I would have done. Recruiter told me a lot of new changes to the process. HC is being phased out, speeding up the process, especially for good candidates. I was told after team match, you'd go straight to the compensation team. Yeah, sounds like they're phasing it out. This is awesome. The process is brutally slow, and it needs a major upgrade. So removing hiring committee from the process could be a really good step for them. It's something foundationally they were just unwilling to get rid of. So if they're getting rid of it, it will probably speed up the process by a couple weeks. That's good. They could still do some other things to speed up the process, and I have some recommendations. I always have a lot of recommendations, but yeah, this is good news. I'm going to come back and I'm going to have to talk to my internal sources and maybe do a video on this if this is really truly the trend of no HC anymore. This is a really good item for candidates. I sat in a lot of HCs, and I'll give you a little context. When I was a hiring program managers for 3 years, I avoided a specific hiring committee. I would hold off on candidates for a specific hiring committee because there was one hiring committee member who liked to say no to everybody. And so I would just wait. I wouldn't even go into that hiring committee because that one person impacted probably hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of candidates because they just like to say no to everybody because it was an ego thing. They just thought they were great and they didn't want to let anybody into the organization. So removing that extra barrier and you just having to crush the interviews and not having to get through hiring committee, we can do like a collective deep breath worldwide to get rid of hiring committee will be an amazing thing. It will make it much, much easier for candidates, much easier. Okay, from the US, awesome. How to impress your recruiter in the phone screen? Graciousness and kindness. That's it. Just be gracious and kind. Be on time. Be attentive. On time, attentive, gracious, and kind. Those are the only things you can do. Just be ready for the typical questions. Why this company? Tell me about yourself. And maybe a couple of domain-specific questions, but just be nice. That's the recruiters aren't treated great, sometimes deservedly so, but if you come in and you do that, you'll do great. Would you recommend joining a startup, having a high learning curve, and then joining a giant like Google, Facebook? Or join Google or Facebook at the start and then have a slower learning curve? It just depends on what you're looking for. So I can answer this question in a different way. Are you somebody who likes to build things? Do you like building a lot of process? Do you like navigating a ton of ambiguity where things are not set up for you? Things need to be created? Or do you like some established process and you like to build off of established process? That's actually the better question. And I find myself all the time in this middle ground. It's like, I don't deal well with no process. I don't deal well with too much process. And so some sort of middle ground would be my ideal. Now, running a startup, I don't even know, like, are we called a startup or something? But I find it incredibly difficult to build all the process and systems from scratch. And that's why I have RRK here to help me with the stuff that I'm not as good at. But I would say it really becomes a process question. Do you really like building, growing, developing process, or do you like some established process in place? That's probably the better question that will help guide you. Either way, both are going to be good opportunities. Absolutely. Helped you prepare for the interview with Google. Just completed your on-site interviews this week, waiting for the update, and you're from the US. Awesome. Continue to keep us updated on your status, please. Really dig the videos. Awesome. Have a quick question. How would you recommend you respond when they ask about an area you have slightly less experience in? Yeah, I mean, I think that you really want to pivot and say, it's a great opportunity for me to learn and grow. And again, I think I mentioned this just a few minutes ago, bring in your unique lens. So how do you bring the power of your lens to something that you don't know a lot about, but how is that unique lens going to actually impact that item or items in a really, really positive way? That sounds very vague, but oftentimes we have transferable skills. And even as we talk about these videos and interviewing, like, what's a huge transferable skill that we talk about all the time? Communication. So we really think about how we communicate and work and collaborate with others. It's a real cross-functional skill set. So think about some of your strongest skills and strengths and how they correlate to the role, even if you don't have skills in a particular area. What is that particular area or areas? Start to think about how your skills would contribute. I hope that helps. Need advice? You're interviewing for a PgM role at Google. Phone interview cleared since April, and you want to proceed to on-site. First recruiter handed you to a new one, and you sent your availability. Okay. Sent your availability, and different times, but the new recruiter never responds. She responded only after the first availability has elapsed, saying she hasn't been able to schedule my on-site. It's June already and she hasn't scheduled my on-site after I cleared the phone interview in April. Should I reach out to my first recruiter who is very responsive and helpful? Yep. So here's what you're going to do. You are going to share your availability over the next 3 weeks. 3 to 4 weeks. You're just going to give an obscene amount of availability. You're going to send it and you're going to CC your old recruiter in and say, hey, you know, I want to share my updated availability. I know things are busy at Google, but I need to know if this process is going to continue, push forward, gracious, kind, CC your old recruiter, because your old recruiter is going to get pretty upset with this other recruiter is my best guess. When these handoffs go poorly, they can get pretty frustrated. I know I experienced a lot of frustration in these handoffs. So CC them. I think it's a good idea. Can you explain how Google's compensation committee works and how much influence does the recruiter have? So compensation committee, they use a third party. So how often they're getting their data and information updated, I think it's on like a yearly basis. It's either biannual or annual. What they do is the compensation committee takes this data from this external third party and they look at it on a market by market basis, and then they pay 75% of the market. So if a software engineer in the Bay Area typically makes X amount, I'm going to play with really bad numbers, math is not my thing, but typically makes, 170, they're going to pay on average 200 for that software engineer because they want to pay the higher percentage. Now, the second part of your question is how much influence does the recruiter have? They have some. They have some. So much of your ability to get more is due to graciousness and kindness. And people can throw that data point out and say it's not important. I absolutely 100% fought harder for the people who were nicer to me. Why? Because that's normal. We're going to really fight for the people who are nice and kind. Why are we going to fight for somebody who's mean to us? There are a lot of candidates who were not very nice to me in the compensation phase. And what was my willingness to go really battle for them? Of course, I wanted to get them what they wanted. But if you don't treat me nicely, it's just demotivating for me to help you. That's life. You want to help the people in your life who are super gracious and kind to you. So be gracious and kind to them, and your recruiter can have more influence. Do they have all the influence in the world? No. And how do they have the most influence? Data. Data helps. But if you set the anchor high and then back it with data, not always. You don't always have to. That's going to be really valuable and helpful. Provided 3 weeks of availability at different times. Oh, yeah. I mean, okay, Stanley. I think we covered this. Let me know if there was anything that wasn't clear. Not received the Amazon assessment yet. The recruiter seems to be having difficulty sending it after 2 attempts. Okay. How should I be following up with her? Yeah, just if a few days have gone by, say, hey, I'm really eager and excited to get started in the process. See if we can resend it. Give an alternative email address. You don't have one, create one. Create a new Gmail address and say, hey, let's try a new address. I created a new account. It's just thatamazon@gmail.com. Let's see if we can try it through this and we can use this email address moving forward. Something like that. I hope that helps. Videos are amazing. Okay, you cleared the GCA round. Okay, awesome. And next round is Googliness and Leadership. Could you please give some tips for that? Also, is the process after that? When does the negotiation stage come in? Yeah, so on the Googliness and Leadership side, I'll probably put some of those YouTube videos. Remember, inclusivity, mentorship, all the positive stuff, and then think about the challenging stuff. Conflict, disagreement with a business directive. So think about it on both sides of the coin. But I'll put some resources in the YouTube description. And then what's the process after that? It really depends on the role. Some roles, it's pretty clearly defined. Some roles, they're just trying to get you into the process. And then the negotiation is apparently coming in earlier if they're removing hiring committee. But we're still kind of looking for the data point on how often that's happening. So we'll have to wait and see if they've completely removed hiring committee, if it's just been niched down for a specific area or areas. So don't worry about the negotiation phase yet. Focus in on crushing the interviews and deal with the negotiation piece later and come back to us when it's time. Okay, so what happens if a candidate rejects? So So then what happens if a candidate rejects? You start the interview cycle all over again. Hey, Max, I'm going to have you come back to me. I'm not really sure. I don't really understand the question. Please come back. First recruiter who reached out to me on LinkedIn was kind. Switch hasn't been helpful. Okay. So Stanley, again, email, CC, availability the next 3 or 4 weeks. That's going to be your path. Okay. You have a Microsoft interview next week for a case study role play, 60 minutes. Do you have any advice on that? Yeah. In the role play, there's rarely a data point when we get these presentations, pre-planned role plays. We got a role play on the spot that every data point isn't critical. What does that mean? Don't miss anything. Like if you're presented with 5 pieces of data, cover all of them, because the chances that Sue and Jane really care about the one piece that you don't cover is going to be really high, right? So make sure you absolutely cover everything. And then really the biggest thing on the role plays is understanding the audience, right? So is the audience technical, non-technical, or both? And you really have to talk that middle line of getting a little bit into the tech, but not too technical that a non-technical person like me wouldn't understand. So those are 2 critical suggestions that I think really help you have success. All data points are important, and understand how technical or non-technical your audience is and try and play that middle ground as much as you can. I hope that helps. Enjoyed my videos. You passed HC and have a meeting with the director coming up soon. Any tips or questions you can ask? Yeah, we can throw in the YouTube description questions to ask your interviewer. When it comes to director level, I don't really know what level you're going in, but it sounds like director level is usually pretty high. Like, what is the higher level like strategy? What is your team? What is your like real team focus? I like when we have these like higher level people to be like overwhelmingly nice and kind, because it's just going to be so much easier for them to envision you in the role, because if they are higher level, you might have less interaction with them. And yeah, I want you to do this all the time, but it needs to be emphasized a little bit more here. But absolutely, like what can you take off their plate? How can you help them? That's a really good approach too. So keep all those things in mind. If you have additional questions, let me know. Does school tag matter for recruiter? How does a recruiter shortlist a resume for an entry-level job at FAANG? I dropped an Ivy League master's because I'm not able to afford the cost. Yeah, so the biggest thing here is I don't care about where you went to school. It doesn't mean that having an elite program, it doesn't mean that having an elite program in your background isn't helpful. Name brands absolutely help. But the biggest thing you want to do is you really want to identify how much of that program you finished. So if you drop the Ivy League Masters, did you do 2 courses, 4 courses, 6 courses? And how many courses does it require to complete a master's? It's not always the same across the board. So completed 6 on a total requirement of 20 classes to complete my master's, or whatever it would be. Just make sure that you're clearly defining that, and that it is very clear that you did not finish school there. Because there was an actual instance of this, of a friend of mine at Google. If you've watched the lives, this is going back quite a bit, but a friend of mine hired somebody. It's a colleague on my team. This person sold their house in Seattle. They were getting on the airplane to come down to Mountain View, and they had to reject the offer because the person had put the education, but not clearly denoted that they did not complete their degree. And it came back in the background check, and they had to, it was a Googliness thing, right? It was a moral thing. So just be really careful with that item. But in terms of whether it matters or not, I don't believe it matters. It's more skill than school. Okay, absolutely, I love it. Using your advice, you cleared RRK, technical rounds for a technical program manager role. What could be your next round? Okay, so, TPMs, so it depends on what kind of TPM. You're going to have domain specific. If it's really technical, you will have a technical round. It is possible to get like a coding or system design, but usually that's a TPM suite. More technical, domain-specific, cross-functional, and absolutely GCA are going to be a few of the upcoming interviews. Really, really lean on your recruiter to tell you what's next. They're going to be the best person to advise you, but those are the few that you should expect. Okay, you finally had your RRK interview for a cloud. You have your RRK interview for a cloud PM tomorrow in the final round. Can I expect more questions or just GCA in case? So you have your RRK interview for cloud PM tomorrow. I really want to make sure we're going back to the recruiter, because a cloud PM, they should really be telling you what you should be facing. So I would say, like, hop off this live, go send that email, because I don't know. So you had your RRK, and tomorrow is the final round. Yeah, I would really ask them, what are the upcoming interviews? Sorry, there's just not enough data here for me to guide you well, and I don't want to misdirect you. So just make sure the recruiter should always be telling us the specific focus areas of our interviews. We don't need to know the interviewer names, but we need to know the specific focus areas. I know that that's not super helpful. Okay, Stephen. All right. One-on-one interview with Google for program manager, GCP, potential team member. I expect it to be behavioral questions. Don't expect that. Behavioral questions, sure. You're always going to get some behavioral questions in these interviews, but we don't know. We don't know our interviewers. Will you probably get behavioral questions? Sure. Could you get open-ended questions? 100%. You get into an interview with me, any interview with me at Google, you're not getting any behavioral questions. I would just crush you with open-ended questions, and not crush you, but like, that would just be my repetitive thing. I didn't like asking behavioral questions. I rarely asked them, and that was my style. So stylistically, they're going to have a list to pick from, so they definitely could be picking open-ended questions. Be prepared for both. Good luck, and please let us know how it goes. Okay, how much higher should I shoot for the senior account manager role at Amazon? You're currently over 140K your company. However, you've researched and heard Amazon pays well over 225 for the role. Dad, let's wait on that. Let's really, really wait. Yeah, I just want you to wait on that item. We're not there yet. Again, if you are forced to give a number, it's going to come later on. And if you think that the role pays well over 225, then be targeting 250 or 275. We don't want to ask for what the role's targeting. We really want to go above it. But we're still at the assessment phase. You're not going to be forced to give a number as long as you stay strong and you're gracious and kind about staying strong and not giving that number. Okay. Hey, Jeff, you really enjoyed the videos. You passed HC and have a meeting with the director coming up soon. Okay, so we answered that question. I can timestamp it. And you can watch. Yeah, I think we answered that question. Okay. Okay, holy garbanzo beans. All right, I like garbanzo beans. All right, the U.S., sweet, Ireland, Bangladesh, amazing. Okay. What is the best place to practice product strategy questions? Where can I get sample answers to? Practice interviews only gives questions. So you can do tryexponent.com. Again, that's tryexponent.com. We like Steven. He's got a good platform, so you can check his out for product stuff. It's pretty good. Had a team fit discussion on Monday, but the recruiter said she'll get back to me at the end of the week. More than 5 business days for HC feedback. Anything to do or just wait? Nope, don't wait. Contact them now, right now. No longer than 5 business days, and that's really long. So just reach out, be proactive. It will help. Jeff, does Google always ask for salary expectations, or they actually have a fixed range to offer candidates for a particular role? Does current salary actually play a major role? Current salary doesn't play a major role unless it's a specific data point where you're getting paid less. Then it becomes data. Even though they tend to like to reject current comp, it's kind of a ridiculous thing because they take into account competings. So why wouldn't they take into account current comp? It's basically the same thing. So only if it's lower. They always do ask for salary expectations, always. And they do have a fixed range to offer candidates. Usually it's pretty low coming in. There's almost always flex and negotiation capabilities. They are never going to come in with a really strong offer. If they don't have numbers or they don't have a lot of data, they're going to come in with their baseline offer. Usually what that means is the base salary is going to come in at the lower end and the stock compensation is going to come in at the bottom end of the barrel. There's usually a little bit of flexibility on the base and a lot of flexibility on the RSUs. Recruiter seems to suggest that the comp committee, the offer would not be negotiable. Don't believe them. It's always negotiable. Always negotiate. Even if they say final and best, say, you know, based on my data, I've really looked at it and I just want to see if you can get X more. I would really appreciate it. This happened with a negotiation client this week. They said best and final. I convinced them to go back and ask for more, and they agreed to go back to comp and ask for more. So you can always ask. Okay. At a certain point, the number of times you failed a Google interview and impacting future applications, yes, it will impact you over time. Now, just applying a ton of times, not a big deal. But at a certain point, they're going to start to look at the data. And if you haven't historically done well, you're going to get less chances. So yes, over time, if you interview and it doesn't go well, it will hurt you over time. But if they continue to interview you, there's probably enough good data in there to keep coming back. Okay, you just joined another company while being in the Google interview process. The process takes 2 months anyway. Will Google be okay with shifting from the recently joined company if I get selected? Also, can I negotiate keeping my new employer's salary as base, or will they look at my last employer? Okay, so yeah, I mean, this is never an ideal scenario to take another job and then leave another company quickly, but the reality is that you're making that current comp at that company. So if the comp conversation comes up, or if you're in a market where you share compensation details of what you're currently earning, it's definitely something that you could be talked through. Okay, your recruiter said your PgM on-site will be an all-day event with 4 interviews, but I see peeps here doing GCA, RRK, Googliness on different days. Is day 1 unique for just a PgM role? So what's happened, and Stanley, it's a great question. So what's happened is COVID has allowed the interview process to be way more flexible. And that's actually a benefit that people aren't really highlighting or talking about. It's way more flexible. They're just going to get you in when they can. Stars aligned on this one, and you're going to do it all in one day. It's definitely not to your advantage. But yeah, you know, if we were in the on-site world where we were actually going in, it would always, for your on-site, be all the same interviews in the same day, or for the vast majority, 90 to 95% would be handled that way. So it's just a case where the stars aligned. That's all it is. People bounce around just because COVID has allowed massive flexibility with video interviews. Your product strategy improvement, open-ended questions. How do you engage the interviewer post the clarification question stage? Mostly in the framework section, idea section. You don't want a monologue. How much weight? Okay, sorry. I think these are 2 separate questions. So product strategy improvement. Okay, great question. The biggest challenge I see on the product side is too much in the beginning. You have to move on and say, look, Sue, there's a million questions we could ask to really establish product strategy, but I just wanted to focus in on those 5. Hit them with that high-level framework. And then, yeah, you don't want to get into a monologue. That's the goal of the framework. You build off of one concept and you drill down and drill down and drill down into each concept methodically. Product questions and our product clients and product managers, any product role, we see a lot of time spent in the beginning and there's never get to the execution. Make sure you get to the execution phase. It's critical. How much weight does an MBA name have while comparing candidates? Doesn't matter. It's not important. I never weighted an MBA for any candidate. I just wanted to find the people with the right skills. Hi. Just wanted to ask you about what type of questions would Google ask for digital marketing apprenticeships? Okay, that's going to be pretty domain specific. And then what we're seeing classically at the apprenticeship level or internship level is a heavy lean behavioral. Not going to be quite as open-ended, not going to be quite as challenging, kind of come after you sort of style. So really craft those behavioral examples. And hey, if some of it's like school projects or education, that's fine. Just make sure you got those behavioral answers down really, really strong. That's my best piece of advice. And of course, any domain expertise is going to be helpful as well. So you dropped out of your Ivy League Masters and will be joining the Tier 2 school. Yeah, okay. Just remember, denote that. Like you can denote transfer or say like, hey, at Harvard, I had 3 credits, but I'm transferring it to a Tier 2 school. Like, just make sure the data is really clear. That's the most important. You're interviewing at Google and anticipating question is why you have changed jobs frequently. This becomes a really positive question when we talk about job changes. It's really opportunity-based. Everything is opportunity-based. It's not bad manager or the company wasn't great or any of that stuff. Each time you've been presented with and given a lot of opportunities and you've jumped on those opportunities and you recognize that it's time for you to really settle down or settle in. And that's why you're so excited to be at Google, a well-established company where you feel like you have an opportunity to stay for a while. As we make a lot of transitions, we just really talk about the positives. Focus on the positivity. It's going to be critical. I have your Google phone business interview tomorrow. Prepared 6 stories based on role-related leadership, Googliness, no GCA wanted with the STAR method. Any more tips? Will Google phone for Google phone business interview? Yeah, I mean, I would say having those examples is great, but then be prepared for open-ended too, right? So really understand the CFAS method. If you're not familiar with CFAS, go into practiceinterviews.com, go into our app and watch the course because there's a good chance that you're going to get an open-ended question. Foundationally, it's great that you have your examples. That's half the battle. Now focus it on the open-ended side. It's just rare that you're not going to get an open-ended question. I can't guarantee it, but we're playing the law of averages. Good luck. A recruiter IC can go up to probably, I think I saw it go up from level 3 to level 6, where you could be an individual contributor. Pay band for those roles. Hey, it's completely dependent upon experience and location. For the premium markets, recruiters are making really, really good money. I hope that helps. I know it's pretty big. Hi. Okay. What sort of G&L questions would be asked for a lead architect GCP at Google? Googliness and leadership questions are not particularly role dependent. They're a little bit more overarching. So thematically, they're going to be similar pretty much across the board. You might get something niche down in terms of like a specific type of challenge that you might have in your role. But no, it's going to be mentorship and then flip the coin with conflict and then inclusivity and all these things that we think about, leadership without authority, navigating ambiguity, all those items. But no, they're not going to be really niche down for your role. They're more holistic. I hope that helps. Okay. Hi, Jeff. You're interviewing for an architect role while being an engineer. The recruiter tried to push me towards the engineer role. Will I have to justify this shift in career path? If yes, how? No, I mean, that's great. Like, if you want to move into an architect role, having a background in Eng is awesome. It makes you more knowledgeable. It will have more connectivity when you're connecting with the engineers as you're trying to architect these items out. Because remember, your architects are super, super front end, right? Like, not front end engineering, but like at the front end of the process. We're architecting things so we can pass them on. We're really in the planning stage. So it's a benefit. Just say, look, at this point in my career, this is where I'd like to go. That's it. That's all you want to do. Stay firm if that's what you really want to do. Okay, so we're hitting an end point. I'm just going to throw up some of these fun questions to start. How to become a billionaire? Anybody in the world can become a billionaire if you believe you can. Don't believe you can? You won't. All these people who have become billionaires at some point believed it was possible. This would be more challenging, but good luck. And then how to become the owner of Google. This is going to be a little trickier because you'd have to own that percentage of the stock, and that I would say would be a little bit trickier. Thanks for chiming in. Okay, so what is the toughest part of the whole Google interview process, and what should one be the most careful about? Toughest part is, for most people, is the GCA interview, just because of the massive amount of ambiguity and the randomness of the questions. Be the most careful about spikes. Really be very, very careful with your words. There are some questions that create major spikes for the interviewers. Specifically, one that happens a lot is candidates just use him to refer to everybody that they interact with. That could be a spike word, right? Just only imagining your audience is male, not a good thing. So just be careful of using negative words, anything negative or anything that's like very gender specific or any of that stuff. Just be careful. Okay, you have 12 years of overall experience with 6 years in program and project management. What level should you be asking for if given the opportunity? 5. Level 5 would be a good level. It might get pushed down to 4. It could go up to a 6, but L5 is probably good. How long should your answers to open-ended product questions last? 45-minute interview. I'm allocating 20 minutes and then 10 minutes for behavioral. 20 minutes if you create a really good dialogue and back and forth, but in that 20 minutes, you need to have multiple breaks in the conversation. You should never be speaking in your solutions for more than 2 minutes at a time. Your interviewer will start to fade. So it could go up to 20 minutes, but it's got to be with a great back and forth. That's not unreasonable. 10 minutes for behavioral questions, too long. 3.5 minutes tops. If they have follow-up questions, it could get longer. Okay, that's a great stopping point for us. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. We sincerely appreciate it. 10 a.m. Pacific. We will be on LinkedIn Live and YouTube Live every week as much as we can be. We've been pretty consistent, and so appreciate everybody. If you have any comments, throw them in the chat and or throw them in the YouTube